So for those for whom the name John Knox is not familiar, can you just succinctly tell us, who was John Knox?
John Knox was essentially a Roman Catholic priest who was one of the party who wanted reform. And eventually, as we know in history, they were not able to reform from within, and he had to go in exile to France. He ended up in Geneva with Calvin. He took the model of Calvin's Geneva back to Scotland when he came back from exile, by which time the nobility in Scotland had decided, influenced by Reformation pamphlets and literature coming across the North Sea from the continent, that the church in Scotland should be reformed. And he arrived back to Scotland that was ripe for his preaching, ripe for the Reformation. And he, because he'd gone to Geneva and liked what he saw in Calvin, he essentially had a model, quite a radical model of Reformation with him when he returned. And he was the charismatic character who was able to pull it off effectively, among others.
What do you think John Knox would think if he walked in the door today? What would he love and what would absolutely shock him?
Oh, Katie, I just would be terrified to know, if I'm being honest. I think, look, Knox is a man of his time, but if you could transcend Knox from his social mores and history, I hope he would be pleased at the ecumenical nature of worship at St. Giles. I think he might not like the fact there's a great big statue of him sitting in the church. That might appear to him to be somewhat idolatrous. But so I pass him every day on the way into my vestry. So I think a lot about him. Funny. It's funny you should ask that question, because I do think a lot about him, and I do often think, now, what would John Knox say? But on the other hand, you know what? He did the best in his time. We have to do the best in our time. We can't be him. He can't be us. But I do hope that he would know that we are engaged in Christian faith and thinking about what it means in the time and the context we live in practical ways, in intellectual ways, but also in ascetic ways, as I try to refer to in my sermon.
So at day one, formerly the Protestant Hour, we represent 81 years of broadcasting the voice of American Protestant preaching. So I'm going to give you a caricature, and I want you to tell me how true it is. John Knox, and then thus Presbyterianism, is largely responsible for what became representative democracy.
I think that's fair, and particularly when you think of the American Constitution. The whole idea of a separation of powers, for example, really comes out of the Scottish Reformation. The idea that on one, you have the spiritual realm and the church, and it shouldn't be interfered with by the state, but also that you have the secular environment, you have the civic magistrate, and they too should not be interfered with by the spiritual realm, that they are separate, and that people have to be trusted with representation. And I think that is just a cornerstone of the Scottish Reformation, and still is a cornerstone of the Scottish psyche, really.
When people say that we are living in a secular age, or that we are living in post-Christendom, I think it's really important to look to, say, something we see as very secular, which is representative democracy, and to see how there's Christian theology baked in there, for better or for worse.
Absolutely. I mean, I think secularism is a fruit of the Reformation.
Absolutely.
And actually, rather than mourn it, we should rejoice in it, because it actually stops the state being the tool of any particular doctrinal or covenantal group who believe they have God in their box. I mean, we see what theocracy has done through world history. We can see it in some countries today, the kind of oppression that happens of ordinary people because people at the top believe they have God in their box and there's no room for anybody else. And of course, they abuse that power. What secularism allows, actually, is a civic space of free debate and discernment. And also, it is really up to the community of faith to share faith. It is not the job of the state. And sometimes, and this is the honest truth, Katie, sometimes the state, certainly in the United Kingdom, has protected some Christians from other Christians because of secularism. Mm-hmm. So you think about issues such as LGBT rights, or you think about the place of women in society. It is the secular state that has often been at the foremost of change and actually protected some Christians from other Christians in civic society. And actually, I think that's a good thing.